A porcupine, yeah. So, people in the first row, your first instinct is going to be, you don't have to do that, and we will get into that a little bit later. The porcupine will be on the table at all times. He's not going to go off the table. I'm not going to be cuddling him for obvious reasons. And I have some food out here for him to motivate him to come out. So we're going to talk a little bit about what porcupines eat as well. So the presentation should be between 20 and 30 minutes, depending on your questions. You can feel free to come and go as you please. There are bathrooms down the hall and to the left. If you have a question, you can just shoot your hand up and I'll try to answer it as best as I can. Come on in, guys. We're about to get started. We're about to see our animal soon.
This is the porcupine?
This is the porcupine. Well, I'm not a porcupine.
No.
Close enough. Alright, so one thing that's really important that we have to do when any wild animal is out that we're seeing here, we have to be quiet. And we don't want to make any sudden movements. Why might we not want to make a lot of noise and move around a lot?
Because it might get scared.
Yeah, it might get scared, and we don't want to do that. Wild animals are a lot more scared of us than we are of them. That is a true phrase. So we don't want to do anything to scare him. We want to make him feel comfortable so that I don't have to put him back in the box so that you guys can see him for the whole presentation. Alright, so I am going to go and bring him out now.
Hey, can you hold this?
Okay, we have to be quiet now so the porcupine doesn't get scared. Here he goes. Okay, so this is our male porcupine. So what's the first thing that he did when he came out of the box? Yeah, he wanted to eat just like a lot of us the first time we came into the world. Porcupines love to eat. They will spend the whole day eating if they could. Has anybody ever seen a porcupine in the wild? Yeah, where have you seen one?
At our house.
At our house?
One
Where
night.
specifically?
In Alton Bay.
Ground or?
On the ground.
On the ground, okay. Has anybody ever seen a porcupine somewhere else that's not on the ground? Trying to climb a tree. Well, it wasn't just trying, it was probably very successful at climbing the tree. Porcupines are great climbers, and they're going to spend most of their time in a tree. So a lot of you who see porcupines in the wild will probably see something like this. So this is a porcupine climbing a tree, and it looks like it's probably the fall or the winter time by the looks of the leaves. And porcupines, they don't actually hibernate, so they'll make a den that they might go into during a snowstorm or something like that, but they're actually going to spend most of their time in a tree, even when they're not hibernating. Most of their time is going to be spent in a tree. So I have a porcupine skull here. What other animal does this remind us of? You can call it out.
Beaver.
A beaver, yeah, a beaver. But what's a little bit different about the porcupine's teeth? Got the two big incisors, just like a beaver, but what's a little bit different? And I'm telling you, it's not the treatment on the skull or the glaze or anything.
They're pointy, right?
No, these are flat. Something very obvious.
The teeth are smaller than the beaver's teeth.
Yeah, teeth are smaller than the beaver. Something extremely obvious. It is the first thing that you noticed about it.
The skull's bigger?
They're curved.
Brown.
They don't line up.
They're orange. They're plastic color. Okay, so we're walking by a creek and we see it's orange. What is in that creek? It's not polluted. It's iron. Yeah. So porcupines' teeth actually have an iron coating over them. This keeps them nice and strong, and this is why we find porcupines up in trees, always gnawing on wood. Porcupine will eat every part of the tree. They will eat the buds, they will eat the leaves, they will eat the bark. What they're really after is what's called cambium. If you've ever ripped a sapling open and it's kind of green on the inside, that's what the cambium is. So that's a really nutrient-dense material that porcupines really like. So most of the time they're going to spend their time in a tree looking for that. So sort of like a beaver, but not quite to the same extent. Has anybody seen a tree where all of the bark all the way around was eaten? Yeah, so if it wasn't like ready to tip over like a beaver, that was probably a porcupine if you're in the right area. So that's actually called girdling. So what the porcupine does, it'll spend all day in a tree and it'll eat all the way around the bark. Does anybody know how a tree gets its nutrients? It takes it through the roots, but how does it get up to the tippy branches? Anybody?
Through the bark.
Through the bark, yeah. So what happens if that continuous flow of bark is gone?
The tree dies.
The tree dies, yeah. So we really don't want trees to die. We want to save the trees. But is this a bad thing that the porcupine is killing the trees?
Yeah, it is.
Well, it would take a lot of porcupines to cause concern for deforestation. It's actually not a bad thing because what's going to happen? It's going to take years for that tree to die. So first, woodpeckers are going to come and they're going to start pecking in the holes. Sap is going to start to leak out. It's going to attract bugs. Once all the bugs are gone, the sap is dried up. Squirrels and owls might move in. Then eventually, years later, the tree is going to fall over, but it's still going to provide life for all of these other creatures. We're going to have detritivores, which are bugs and critters that eat dead things. We might even get salamanders. Certain critters might lay their eggs in the rotting wood. So do you think the porcupine knows that it's creating like dozens of new ecosystems? No. Probably not. It's just like, oh, that was a nice snack. So the porcupines really do us a lot of good around here. Do we have any questions so far before I keep going? Yep.
Does the porcupine ever get tired of eating?
Does the porcupine ever get tired of eating? I mean, I'm sure like all of us, it probably eventually gets tired of eating. But if we kept giving it food, it would probably eat for a long time. I'm the same way, so I can relate to a porcupine. Yep, what's your question? Does he have a name? Yes, he does. His name is Porcupine. Oh, that's not the name you were looking for, right? Okay. His name is Porcupine 2013. That's not the name you're looking for either. People are wondering, what's his pet name, like a cat or a dog? This is not a pet. This is a wild animal. So we don't want to be naming our animals because it's a big trend lately that people are taking wild animals into their home. They find an orphaned baby and they want to nurse it back to health. They don't rehabilitate the baby right, so it's too imprinted by people. They keep it as their pet. There is no better life in captivity that you can give an animal than it can have in the wild. Wild animals belong in the wild unless for some reason they cannot survive. This porcupine was hit by a car, so he cannot survive in the wild. Porcupines are already, like, they walk pretty laboriously and slow. So when that's hindered even more, that could impact the ability to climb. And porcupines spend most of their time in their tree. That's their safe place. So he would not be able to survive in the wild if he couldn't climb. That's also one of his defense mechanisms, is to climb. So speaking of defense mechanism, what is something very obvious about a porcupine?
Quills.
The quills! Okay, so who thinks that they know a bit about their quills? Yep. What's something that they do with their quills? Where did his quills go? So he has fur that's covering all them. So I'm going to make him spike up his quills. And you can see I am wearing a Kevlar glove. So we don't want to do this to a wild porcupine. There he goes. There he goes. Yeah, I'll try to get him to turn around so that you can see. There he goes. Okay, what didn't happen? They didn't shoot out. Okay, so I am going to give you guys an experiment here. I'm going to use this young lady right here because she has nice long hair. Okay, so who said the quills didn't shoot? Was that you? Okay. Nothing happened. She can't shoot her hair. Neither can the porcupine. The porcupine's quills are actually just a modified hair. So yeah, it's a type of fur. And so we think that the myth that porcupine can shoot their quills came from like any cat or dog. What does a dog do as soon as it gets out of the water? It shakes. So like any other animal, porcupines aren't spending too much time in the water, but every now and then they like to shake. Since the quills are extremely loosely attached to the porcupine's body, which is how there's such a unique defense mechanism, they shed just like any other fur. So when they shake, some of those are probably ready to come off. But when they shake, it looks like they're flying everywhere. They can't aim their quills. They can only lift them up and put them back down. So they can't aim, they can't shoot like a skunk would be able to shoot its musk. Let's get in some more dandelions over here. So why don't we saw some of his quills, but why don't we take a closer look? This here is a super duper genuine, put in an expanding machine from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. This is made of wood, but it's the same idea. So this is the end that is attached to the porcupine. What do we notice about it? Besides that it's white, we already did our colors for today.
It's flat.
It's not really flat, but it's thinner. Yeah, it's a lot thinner. So this is the part that's very loosely attached to the porcupine. So anything that touches it, since this is not very attached to the porcupine, it's going to come right out. This is the end that we are all worried about. So what does this kind of remind you of?
A spear.
A spear, okay, something that we use off of a rod at the end of a line. A fishing hook, yeah, it's got barbs. So the whole point of a fish hook is to have a barb on it so that fish goes in, but the fish can't get off very well. This is the same idea. So the porcupine, an animal will come in contact with the quill and it'll get stuck in there. These barbs are going to start to expand and absorb the moisture. So it's going to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the animal. And unfortunately, sometimes that hits a vital organ and sometimes animals can die from this. So if I were to quill myself, which I don't recommend doing, in the hand and I left it there overnight, it would be coming out the other side of my hand by the next morning. So they move through your hand, yeah, which is a very unique adaptation. So this is a great defense mechanism for the porcupine. Something else that's pretty important about the quill is that it's black and white. Black and white in nature is a warning sign. It means you don't want to mess with me. I'm an animal that you should leave alone. What other animals are black and white? A skunk, yeah. Well, a skunk is not black and white just because somebody decided to make it black and white. It's because there's an intention. It was purposely made black and white for that adaptation. Yep.
My dog's black and white.
Some dogs are black and white, so then maybe some wild animals might see that and be like, oh, I don't want to mess with that dog. But that dog might really want to play with the porcupine. So let me give you a scenario. So you let your dog out into the backyard and it comes back with a face full of porcupine quills. So you take it to the vet and the vet gets all the quills out. Is it the dog's fault or is it the porcupine's fault? Who says porcupine? And who says dog? Yeah, it's the dog's fault because the porcupine is not going to attack any animal. All it's going to do is it's going to stomp its feet, it might chatter its teeth, and it's going to swing its tail around. It's not going to even be aiming for the animal. It's just waiting for the animal to get close enough to be able to hit it. So an animal has to touch the porcupine in order to be killed by it. So the dog is all fine, and then the next day you let him back out, and he goes back and he gets quilled again. He just really wants to play with this porcupine, but the porcupine is a little bit cranky. So you bring him back to the vet. Is it the porcupine's fault or the dog's fault?
Dog.
Yeah, it's still the dog's fault. The dog came in contact with the porcupine and agitated him. So you bring the dog back in, take him to the vet, which you should always do. If you live far away from your vet and your dog gets quilled, you might want to give them a call to see what they want you to do. So you let him out a third time. Once again, he has failed to befriend the porcupine. He comes back with a face full of quills. Whose fault is it?
Your fault.
It's your fault because you let the dog out. It's your fault that you knew that there was a porcupine out there and you know that your dog's not going to learn. Dogs just want to be friends and they want to play with other animals. And you know, some dogs aren't the sharpest tool in the shed. So yeah, it's your fault if that keeps happening. So what you want to do is you want to be able to let your dog out at times when the porcupine isn't active. So don't let your dog out at dawn. Don't let your dog out at dusk. If you have to let him out to do a busy, then you should have him on a leash just to be able to protect him from the porcupine. I'm going to give him a little more food. Do we have any questions so far? Yep. What's your question?
I think my dog is like playing with other animals.
Oh yeah? I don't know. Your dog might see the porcupine and think that that's a great ball to play with. How many babies do they have? That's a great question. So, porcupines are rodents, but what are rodents known for? Like rats and mice, what are they kind of known for? Lots of babies. Well, the porcupine is pretty unique. So, animals that don't have a long lifespan tend to have a lot more babies just to make up for the population. The porcupine can live to about 10 years in the wild, which is a pretty long life for a rodent. So, they don't need to have that many babies. So, they're only going to have one, maybe two babies. Which brings me to the cutest part of the presentation. Does anybody know what a baby porcupine is called? You know? No? How many quills they have? I'm going to put a pin in that for a second and we're going to come back to that. Does anybody know what a baby porcupine is called? Close. We're getting warmer. Anyone else?
Come right back.
No? Okay. It's a porcupet, and they're so cute. They would not make a very good pet, but porcupet, in my humble opinion, is the cutest name for a baby animal ever. So they're going to have one, maybe two porcupets. This might pose a problem for mom, maybe. What might be the issue for mom? The quills, yeah. The porcupine comes out with its quills all ready to go. But just like us, or most of us, were born head first. Porcupines are the same way, so the quills are not going to hurt mom. They're also a lot softer, because in there it's pretty warm, it's a little bit damp in there. So the quills are soft when they come out of mom, and then within 20 to 40 minutes they harden up and they're ready to go. And so any animal that messes with them, they're going to get quilled, even if it's by a tiny little baby porcupine. So you asked how many quills they have. So I'll make him spike up his quills again, and we'll have people guess. Can anybody count all those?
No.
No? Okay, well let's take a guess. We have like a rough estimate. 200? No. 1,000? 100? 100? Keep going. 500? The person who said 1,000 was the closest.
How many?
6,000.
6,000? Okay, we're getting closer, but those are all way too low numbers.
100,000.
Do you have TikTok?
I'm trying to think of what's closer. You were actually the closest. Okay. So this gentleman here said 100,000. That was the closest answer. Porcupines have 30,000 quills on them at any given time. They are born with all 30,000, and that's a rough estimate. I'm not exactly sure how they determined that. I guess some unlucky porcupine maybe got hit by a car and they decided to pick off all the quills and count them.
So when their quills drop off, do they regenerate new quills?
Yep, they're just like fur. So porcupines have 5 types of hair. Guys, it's getting a little loud. Porcupines get pretty stressed. So we have to quiet down, or else I'm going to have to pick a porcupine up. So the porcupine has 5 types of hair. It has its whiskers, like a lot of animals do. It has these white guard hairs that are sticking out. Those really long ones, those aren't quills. Those are guard hairs. And that's actually what's going to stimulate the quills. They also have their woolly underfur for the winter time, so that's what all this black fuzz is. He still hasn't shed his winter coat completely. And underneath his tail, he has bristles. And that's really going to help him for climbing, for traction. It helps him to keep from sliding back down the tree. And of course he has the quills. So the quills are the 5th type of hair. So like anything else, they're going to shed and then they're going to regrow. And it's going to be about 1 millimeter a day. And porcupines at any given square inch on their body can have 100 quills growing. So that's a lot. What am I feeding him? I'm feeding him some what we call rodent chow, because he's a rodent. So he's an herbivore, so he only eats plant material, which is why he likes to spend so much time in trees. So right now I'm giving him some greens, some apples, some rodent chow, and a strawberry. You wouldn't necessarily be finding these things in the wild, but we're not going to go around letting our porcupines climb trees and or the trees or give them trees to chew on. So that's what his diet consists of here. But we will also cut off some fresh leaves off of his favorite trees and feed them to him.
Do they exist all over the world, or are they only in North America?
No, they exist all over the world. There are different species of porcupine. I don't know all the different species, but there are porcupines in more than just 4.
What are some predators?
Some predators of porcupines. Okay, well, cars are number one. That's the number one predator for a lot of animals. Cars, trappers are humans. I'll go right there. But there is one natural predator to the porcupine. We have one out on exhibit. Somebody might know this if you're from the area. Does anybody know? A fisher cat, the baseball player. Interesting. A fisher does a great job eating up the porcupine. So a fisher cat is a baseball player. It's not a cat. It's just a fisher. It's a member of the weasel family. So this is a fisher pelt. It's basically a giant weasel. Or kind of like a mink too. So, if anybody's ever seen a weasel or a mink, they move really fast. So they can climb really well too. So the porcupine, he can climb pretty well, but he's a little bit slow going. So what the fisher is going to do is he's going to chase the porcupine up its tree, and it's going to run circles literally around the porcupine. Porcupine might get a little confused because he's a little bit slower than the fisher. And if anybody's a hunter, you might have actually witnessed a porcupine falling out of a tree, and then they try to get back up. So the fisher will try to confuse the porcupine as much as possible till it falls out of the tree, hopefully onto its back. Within like 4 or 5 bounds, that fisher is already back on the ground. Porcupine is still laying there, like trying to get its balance, and the fisher is going to eat it from the stomach. Because porcupines don't have quills on their legs or on their stomach. They also don't have quills on their face, which is another way that fishers will get porcupines if they're not in a tree. They'll run circles around the porcupine until it exposes its face by accident. Because porcupine's first line of defense is going to be this, and poke out all the quills to protect its face. A fisher is going to come right for the porcupine's face, bite it, flip it over, and then eat it from the inside. Sometimes we see this, porcupines who have been hit by cars too. They'll just come, flip them over, and eat it from the inside.
I know we don't have them on here, but I thought wolverines could eat porcupines.
They could. They might have adaptations that allow them to hunt porcupines. Any animal could eat a dead porcupine if it found it. They probably will. They would just have to be smart enough to know not to start on this end.
Yeah.
How common are porcupines?
How common are porcupines? They're certainly not endangered or anything like that in New Hampshire. They're pretty common. I still haven't seen one in the wild. I know a few people who have, but most it's because they're always up in the trees. Sometimes they can get pretty high up there. How big are they without their quills? That's a good question. I have actually seen a picture of a porcupine without any quills on it. Unfortunately, this porcupine got sick. It got mange, which sometimes our dog gets. So they actually had to take out all the quills so that the porcupine could heal. They look a lot smaller without their quills. I would say bigger than a rabbit, but they do look a lot smaller than without all this fur and all these quills. Yep.
I've seen a porcupine in Portsmouth.
Oh, you've seen a porcupine in Portsmouth? Oh, well, yeah, so that actually leads me to another point. Salt water. Do we all like French fries here? What's the best part of a French fry? The salt. The porcupine thinks so too. It's not going out to McDonald's and getting French fries. However, they crave salt. Sodium is a vitamin, a mineral that they lack. So a lot of people will see porcupines in the wintertime chewing on their car bumpers, eating their decks that have been treated maybe with a sodium substance, or a glaze or something like that. Any wood that might have salt on it, your porch, if you have an outhouse in your yard, porcupine will come and chew that for the salt. I've seen pictures of people barricading their cars in with chicken wire every day. Just the porcupines from chewing on the bumper. Because all the salt from the road accumulates. And they love it. I can't blame them, really. Any more questions about our porcupine? Alright, well, I'm going to put him back in the box, but I will leave out the fisher pelt and the skull if you guys want to come up and get a closer look and you can feel this. Yeah?
What happens if there's no more beavers around? No more porcupines.
What happens if there's no more porcupines? Well, the ecosystem would probably be a little bit out of balance. Mother Nature has a really great thing going on right now, so if we probably just don't want to get too close to the table because I'm very interested in you. Mother Nature has a great thing going already, and if we mess something up or if the species gets extinct, then the whole thing gets thrown off balance. So I'm sure whatever habitat the porcupine lived in, it probably wouldn't be very good without the porcupine. Alright, so I'm going to put him back in the box. Can anybody think of a way to help me to get him back in the box? Ooh, yeah. Oh, he's already sensing, yeah. Ready.
Last year I had a porcupine climb a tree 2 feet from me when I was in my stand up there.
Oh, really?
Didn't even care. Went up there for its, to go to sleep that night.
Oh, yeah, right. He's a very young and hormonally driven porcupine, so he doesn't like a lot of objects. Let's go this way. Oh, they were covering the rodent shell, that's why he got mad at it. Come on in there. Here you go. He's like, no, I don't want to go. Oh, there he goes. Has anybody ever heard any sounds from a porcupine?
No.
Yeah, it's like a weird, it's like a mix between a grunt and a chirp.
They chirp, they grunt, they scream, they wail. If you've ever heard a porcupine scream, it's hard not to run for your life. It's very intimidating. Alright, so I'm going to put it back in the box, but feel free to come up and check out some of these.
Someone asked how much do they weigh?